Randolph Mantooth once said something about the man who gave him the role of his life that most fans have never heard. He didn't call him a mentor, he didn't call him a father figure, he said they had yelling matches. "We had some yelling matches about that," Mantooth admitted years later, "and about other things too." The man on the other side of those arguments was Jack Webb, Joe Friday himself, the most disciplined, most demanding, most exacting producer in all of television, the man whose badge 714 was officially retired by the Los Angeles Police Department when he died. And here is the strange, beautiful truth that Randolph Mantooth carried quietly for more than 50 years. The boss he fought with on that set, the one who ran the whole production, in Mantooth's own words, like a boot camp, is the same man who handed him the character that would define his entire life. This is the story of Randolph Mantooth and Jack Webb. To understand why it mattered, you have to understand where Randolph Mantooth started. Because he started with almost nothing. He was born in Sacramento in 1945. His father was of Cherokee and Seminole descent, and the family moved so often that young Randy never stayed in one town long enough to build real friendships. He would later describe himself as a boy who lived, in his own words, in his own little fantasy world. That was where the acting came from, not from ambition, from loneliness. He found the stage almost by accident, first in a high school in Santa Barbara, then at Santa Barbara City College, then, improbably, on a scholarship all the way across the country to the American Academy of Dramatic Arts in New York. It was there, playing the lead in a stage production, that a legendary Universal talent scout named Eleanor Kilgallen spotted him. She got him signed to a contract and brought him back to California in 1970. But a Universal contract in 1970 did not make you a star. It made you a face they could plug into anything. And that is exactly what they did. Randolph Mantooth spent his first couple of years doing small parts on the biggest shows of the era: Ironside, The Virginian, Marcus Welby, MD, The Bold Ones, a line here, a scene there, a young contract player waiting for someone, anyone, to see something in him, and then someone did. It happened during a guest spot on an episode of The Bold Ones, the NBC legal and medical drama. Mantooth played a young man who breaks down during courtroom testimony, a raw, emotional scene opposite the great Hal Holbrook. It was the kind of scene an unknown actor prays for, and Mantooth poured everything into it. He had no idea who was watching. The producer Robert Senator saw that courtroom breakdown, and the way Mantooth later told the story, Senator's reaction was immediate and absolute. "From what I was told," Mantooth recalled, he went, "That is my Johnny Gage." That was the moment. That single scene, that single breakdown, is the reason a lonely kid from Sacramento became one of the most beloved faces on American television. But the man whose machine he was about to walk into, the man whose vision, whose rules, whose iron discipline governed everything that show would become, was someone else entirely. His name was Jack Webb, and to understand Jack Webb, you have to understand that he too had come from nothing. Jack Webb grew up poor in the Bunker Hill section of Los Angeles. His father left before he was born. Webb never knew him. He was raised in a rough neighborhood by a single mother, served as an altar boy, and clawed his way up through radio in the 1940s. And in 1949, he created something that would change television forever: Dragnet. As Sergeant Joe Friday, Webb became the face of the American procedural, the flat, deadpan delivery. Just the facts, ma'am. The obsession with realism. He didn't just act in Dragnet. He produced it, directed it, and controlled every frame of it through his own production company, Mark 7 Limited. He built a relationship with the Los Angeles Police Department, so close they would eventually retire badge 714 in his honor. By the time Randolph Mantooth walked onto his set, Jack Webb had already created Adam 12, and out of Adam 12 he was building his next hit, a show about a brand new kind of hero almost no one in America had ever heard of: paramedics. That show was Emergency. Universal Television co-produced it with Webb's Mark 7 Limited, bringing the full weight of two Hollywood powerhouses to bear on a story most people thought was too obscure to work. So picture it. On one side, a 26-year-old kid who had never carried a series in his life and, by his own admission, had no idea what a paramedic even was. There were, at that point, only a handful of them in all of California. Governor Ronald Reagan had only just signed the Wedworth-Townsend Act, the legislation that allowed paramedics to legally operate in the state for the first time. On the other side, a 51-year-old television titan who ran his sets with military precision and did not suffer amateurs. They were about to spend the next several years in each other's faces. Emergency premiered on January 15, 1972, as a 2-hour mid-season replacement on NBC, following the fictional Squad 51 rescue team. And from the very beginning, it carried Jack Webb's fingerprints on every single frame. Webb had one obsession above all others: realism. He had built Dragnet by spending countless hours with real police officers until the procedures and the language were exactly right, and he applied that same doctrine to emergency. He insisted on a near-documentary style. The man who made it all possible was Battalion Chief Jim Page, who had been building Los Angeles County's brand new paramedic program almost from scratch. Page became the show's chief technical advisor, and the character of Johnny Gage was very nearly named Johnny Page in his honor. Webb had Mantooth and his co-star Kevin Tighe, who played Roy DeSoto, Johnny's partner, sit in on actual paramedic classes and ride along with the fire department, so that when they picked up the equipment on camera, they would look like men who genuinely knew what they were doing. Actors like Julie London and Bobby Troup, who played the doctors and nurses at Rampart General Hospital alongside Dr. Kelly Brackett's team, inhabited the same world of procedural rigor. It worked so well that people stopped believing Randolph Mantooth was an actor at all. Fans, newspapers, even people inside Hollywood became convinced that he was a real paramedic who acted on the side. It got so bad that, as Mantooth revealed in a later interview, producers stopped offering him roles. "I didn't get any offers," he said. He was too convincing at the very thing Webb had trained him to do. That was the gift of Jack Webb's method. But the gift came with a cost, and the cost was Webb himself. Because Jack Webb did not run a relaxed set. He runs this production like a boot camp, Mantooth said flatly in a 1973 interview. And he meant it. Webb was a perfectionist who rewrote scripts late into the night to get the pacing and the accuracy exactly right. He demanded efficiency. He demanded discipline. He had a perfectionism that sometimes alienated the people around him, even as it earned their deepest respect. Kevin Tighe, standing beside Mantooth in that same era, put it more diplomatically. "He is an interesting man to work with as an actor," Tighe said. "Technically, he's perfect." Webb even kept an open-door policy of a kind. "We have an open invitation to go in and see Webb anytime," Tighe said. "You can go in if you feel like listening for 5 to 10 minutes. You can hear the whole relationship in that line. You could visit Jack Webb, as long as you understood you were there to listen." And Randolph Mantooth, young and idealistic and stubborn, did not always want to just listen. The biggest fight was about the work itself. Webb, ever the efficiency man, wanted his actors to read their lines off a teleprompter rather than memorize them. To Webb, it was simple arithmetic. Reading off a prompter saved time, and time was money, and money was the whole game. To a 26-year-old actor who had crossed the entire country on a scholarship to learn his craft, it was almost an insult. For one thing, he wanted me to read my lines from a teleprompter rather than memorize them, Mantooth remembered. His way would save time and therefore money, which was his big consideration. But as an actor, I felt that was wrong. I felt that I could do a much better job as an actor if I memorized my lines. And then the line that says everything. We had some yelling matches about that, and about other things too. Think about the nerve that took. This was a contract player with barely any credits to his name, standing toe-to-toe with the man who invented the modern police drama, arguing about acting. Most young actors in that position would have read whatever Jack Webb told them to read and been grateful for the paycheck, Mantooth argued, because he cared about the work more than he cared about being comfortable. And the fights weren't only about the teleprompter. Mantooth had bigger, braver objections to the whole shape of the show. He thought it was too clean, too idealized. He said the series showed fire departments not as they really were, but as they would like to be. And he wanted it to hurt a little more, to be a little more honest about the job. He even objected to the fact that the paramedics always won. The public doesn't want to see weaknesses in its heroes, Mantooth said. We're fighting like hell to lose a patient once in a while. You can only see a person saved from a heart attack just so often. Ty agreed with him. I'd like to see it a little more realistic, he said. They lost that argument. Jack Webb kept the show hopeful, kept the heroes winning, kept it exactly as idealistic as he wanted it. And here is the part that stings a little. Webb was right about the audience. Week after week, Emergency held its own on Saturday nights, sometimes even beating the mighty All in the Family in its time slot. The public saw exactly what Webb believed they needed to see: competent, decent men saving lives. And the public loved it. So this was the strange dynamic at the heart of it all. A young actor fighting for realism and grit. An old master insisting on hope and heroism, yelling matches on a set run like a boot camp. Two men who came from nothing, both of them convinced they knew what the work should be, and neither of them could have known, in the middle of all that friction, what that friction was actually building. Here is what the yelling matches produced. Randolph Mantooth walked into that boot camp a green contract player. He walked out of it something else entirely. The discipline he fought against became the discipline he lived by. The realism Webb drilled into him, sharpened by Jim Page's real-world expertise, became the thing that made his performance so believable that America couldn't tell where the actor ended and the paramedic began. And then something happened that tells you everything about how far he had come. Randolph Mantooth started directing episodes of Emergency himself. The kid who had shouting matches with Jack Webb about how a scene should be shot ended up behind the camera on Webb's own show, running the machine he had once only argued with. Jack Webb's boot camp didn't break Randolph Mantooth, it made him a filmmaker. But the deepest thing Webb gave him wasn't a skill, it was a purpose. Because of Johnny Gage, Randolph Mantooth spent the rest of his life in service to real paramedics and firefighters. He became a spokesman for the International Association of Firefighters and the International Association of Fire Chiefs. He spent decades traveling the country, speaking at emergency medical conferences, standing up for the people who do the job for real. He understood something that humbled him, that the show had inspired a whole generation of Americans to become paramedics. Ask an EMS worker of a certain age why they got into it, and a startling number of them will tell you the same two names: Johnny and Roy, Johnny Gage and Roy DeSoto, the men of Squad 51. Mantooth carried that like a debt. There's a debt I owe them, he once said of paramedics and firefighters, that I probably can't ever pay back, but I'm gonna try. None of that happens without Jack Webb, without the realism, without Jim Page's technical guidance, without the ride-alongs, without the boot camp that made it all true enough to matter. Jack Webb never got to see how the whole story turned out. On December 23, 1982, he died of a heart attack. He was 62 years old. The city he had spent his life honoring honored him back. The Los Angeles Police Department retired badge 714, Joe Friday's badge number, in his memory, for a television detective who had never made a single real arrest. Because for millions of Americans, he had come to represent the real thing. Randolph Mantooth outlived him by more than 40 years. And in all that time, he never stopped carrying the thing Jack Webb built. When Mantooth passed away on July 9, 2026, at the age of 80, after a long battle with cancer, the tributes that poured in didn't just remember an actor, they remembered a man who had spent his life making sure real first responders were seen. The exact mission Jack Webb had handed him, whether either of them meant it that way, on a set run like a boot camp all those years ago. Two men who came from nothing, who fought over teleprompters and realism, and heroes who win too often, who never, as far as anyone knows, called each other friends the way Mantooth and Kevin Tighe were friends. And yet, it was Jack Webb's machine that turned a lonely kid from Sacramento into Johnny Gage. And it was that lonely kid who took what Webb built and spent the next 50 years making it mean something real. You don't usually hear the story this way. The tributes talk about the tragic loss, the beloved show, the partner he called his best friend. All of that is true, and all of it matters. But there's a quieter truth underneath it. Sometimes the person who shapes your entire life isn't the one you love easily. Sometimes it's the one you argue with, the demanding one, the one who runs the whole thing like a boot camp and makes you furious and makes you better in the exact same breath. Jack Webb never softened. Randolph Mantooth never stopped fighting for the work. And out of that friction came Johnny Gage, a character who, decades after both men are gone, is still the reason someone, somewhere, is putting on a uniform tonight. Both men are gone now. What they built together is still saving lives. Rest easy, Randy, and thank you, Jack. If this story meant something to you, take a moment in the comments and tell us. Were you one of the millions who watched Squad 51 every Saturday night? We're remembering the whole emergency family this week, the ones we've lost, and the ones still with us.